Alright, so this is my Nephilim recap of round 2. I'd like to apologize in advance for this one. I think for a bunch of reasons it's not going to be the greatest recap. The main one is my program to look at games. I thought we had gotten it working for rule sets. It gets confused if there's same wall but not same, or plus wall but not plus. It doesn't work properly. And I thought we had gotten it working, but it's been crashing on me as soon as I try to make moves because of a resizing issue, and it's messy, and it's all a problem, which means I didn't have a good way to look at the games quickly, to look for nice moments, and then I didn't feel inspired to put together graphics for the positions, because I was sort of wanting to do the lazy way and just show it in the program so I could look at moves more easily and show variations, but then they wouldn't show, and I got lazy about graphics. So we're not actually going to be looking at any games. That's completely on me, and not quite getting this program working yet. And then the other reason it's going to be a bit of a downer is because I felt really bad about the rule set and wanted to complain about it and wrote a lot of slides about that, and they might be a bit much, so we might skip through them. But hopefully there will be some interesting stats on the round at the end. I don't want to take away from people who won in this round. I am intending to do a road to the finals for all 3 players that make the finals video. Unless I'm one of them, in which case I probably won't do one for me. But 2 or 3 road to the finals videos, if I'm lucky enough to be one of them, obviously. But some road to the finals videos, and maybe find some ways to cover if players played some really nice games this round in later games once I have this stuff working. In later videos, I mean. But as is, the coverage is going to be kind of scarce here. What I do want to start by talking about is that I think the rule set was bad, and I want to talk about why it was bad. So level 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 must use 1 card from each level, all decks, same plus wall combo, no rares or semis, all cards must have 4 different numbers. And I think sort of each component of this is interesting, and together they don't come together well. And so let's get into why that is, because I think why some rule sets work well and others don't work as well is really interesting. And fundamentally, this looks really similar to the first round rule set, which in the end I think was a good rule set. That rule set, notable difference, it had plus, and it allowed semis, and it didn't have the all cards must have 4 different numbers stipulation, though usually that's a kind of interesting stipulation, but we'll get into it. Actually, first, Villalva came up with a really interesting question, and I think this is fun to solve, and I hope someone tries to solve it. I'll give the answer later in the video after the stats page. So if you get to the stats page and want to come back and solve this, it's an interesting question. So, presuming your opponent will have a 7/6 corner as their level 4, what combination of a level 2 and a level 4 can you have such that with just those 2 cards, following the no double number stipulation, you can cover every potential opposing 7/6 corner? So for instance, if they played 7/6, 3, 2, and 7, can you take that at least one way with your level 2 and 4? But you also have to be able to take a 6/7 corner in 7 as well, and both potential 7/6 corners for each other corners. We think there is only one combination of 2 cards that fully covers every corner just between the 2 of them, meaning they have at least 1 capture on every possible 7/6 corner. So I thought this was a fun puzzle, and good luck trying to solve it, I hope. I am going to show the solution later, but I think it was a fun little puzzle and not the kind I tend to notice, and I thought Villalva thinking to look for this and realizing that there was a unique solution was a really cool idea and a cool thought. And so I'm really glad he sent me that, because that was one of the most interesting things to try to figure out with this rule set was the question he came up with. So try to answer if you're interested. I think it's a fun solution. If there isn't a unique solution, if there's actually a second solution, I'd love to hear that, but I believe the solution is unique. So initial thoughts. I was down on the rule set, and I think when you're down on a rule set, you still have to adjust to it, whether or not it fits what you're used to doing. You got to figure out how to make it work. But I want to say why I think it was bad and why I think adjusting to it was difficult. So, 1, there are no double numbers. and there's only one card allowed with a 10, and there are no pluses. So, unless your 10 happens to set up a same against their 10, which is very unlikely and I believe never happened in any of the games played, there are going to be no ways to take 10s. 10s are basically just safe. And I tend to think you want to veer away from things that start acting like a no-rules set, right? There is no way to set up your hands such that you're prepared to deal with opposing 10s. They're just something, when they play their card with a 10, that's just a safe card. The massive variation in levels makes S unlikely to apply often. Plus would be a much more frequent occurrence than same on this kind of set. It is more frequent already, but it is additionally so on a set like this. In practice, this means that the set is very close to plus wall combo. Seto Foyer was decided by a same that was set up, and I think there was one other match where a same was set up importantly, though it might have just led to a tie. But I know at least one game was decided by a same, but it was pretty infrequent to have significant impact on the game. So it's quite different from plus wall combo, which is not vastly different from no rules. It's sort of an odd version of no rules because it's no rules except occasionally things can take stuff that they don't overpower. And when they do, it combos. So, it's not really no rules, but it has a no rules-ish feel. And no rules with massive level splits, I thought was incredibly drosh. We'll see if I was actually right on that, because I think some of my thoughts coming into the round weren't correct. And also, due to there being no plus, and especially there being the all cards must have 4 different numbers on them, I thought, well, due to no plus, all the available combos are going to be determined in card select, right? There's not going to be much interactivity, If you have an 8-7-6-4, it can plus 9s in certain spots, but it's never going to be able to set up to plus 9s it couldn't already. Which cards you pick for your hand determine which things you can cover, and you simply will not be able to adjust and cover things through synergies within your hand. And so I thought there was little room to maneuver during the game on that front, though that may leave room to maneuver in card select. So comparing to the first set, the first set saw a real runaway effect, where getting an advantage often proved decisive, and I thought here it would be very difficult to get a large enough advantage to win. And then I think the no repeat numbers ends up actually being one of the biggest problems here, which is sort of odd because I kind of like it as a stipulation. For instance, on a level 10 game, no repeat numbers is really interesting because often people use kind of 6-6-8-8s as a crutch to make sure, or 5-5-9-9s or 8-8-7-6s or whatever, and I certainly do, to make sure you have certain 10s covered. And how are you going to be able to have those 10s covered? You can cover them through synergy, but you have to be able to build synergy to get there. And so I think it's usually an interesting set. But here, no double numbers means the A's are unopposed. Instead of it being something where you have to set up against the A's, it combines with no plus to mean, in fact, you just can't deal with A's. Luckily, there's only one available to your opponent, but it does mean you just can't deal with it. And basically, because it's so close to no rules, you basically want maximal power. And that means there's going to be very little variation in what people do. You're going to have an A9 for level 10, you're going to have a 9-8 for level 8, you're going to have an 8-7 for level 6, you're going to have a 7-6 for level 4. Probably going to be more creative on level 2, and as we saw during the round, people were a bit more varied on level 2. But basically, these cards were just locked into almost every hand, and usually the corner value. And this also means it's hard to figure out. So normally if you thought, okay, I know everyone's going to go for this number, I should make sure the backsides of my cards have good plus walls against those because plus wall is on. But we know there are going to be 2 9s, 2 8s, 2 7s, 1 10. We can't target that anyway. But there's going to be an equal number of 9 8s and 7s, and there's almost no choice in that, which means there's nothing specific to target. You might target whichever you think will happen to be more likely to be played before you play your card that targets it. But it means setting up to be able to punish a hand that is overinvested in 7, 8s, or 9s is not going to be an effective strategy because there is basically a forced equal distribution. And when there is a forced equal distribution, you can't really figure out, here is a way to counter that I think they will overcommit to something. And so I think it both locks in too many cards, and the back sides of the cards, the non-strong corner part, there's not much interest in deciding because you can't figure out what you need to exploit or see their hand, see, they're committing really hard to 8s. I should build to punish that, because they can't commit really hard to 8s. And so I think this makes it tough to adjust to hands you see, and also to do different things with your hands than your opponent might be doing. And because of that, I think it's a much tougher rule set to like adapt to and figure out, because you're locked into so much of the same things. One question I had was, do you want the backside? Say you have an A9 and a 9-8 as opposite corners. Say you have an A9 6-4, something like Squall, and a 9-8 corner in the opposite corner. Do you want the 9-8 in the opposite corner to have like a 4 facing to the left, where Squall has a 4 facing to the right to potentially set up sames? Or do you want it to have a weaker number there to make sure Squall will be able to capture it if needed? And I think the answer is you want a weaker number, because I think without same wall, the sames are less likely. And also the sames just don't happen much anyway, I don't think, on this set. And so I think it's more important to be able to set up cards that definitely can recapture each other than set up things hoping to set up synergies in the game, which again makes this a much closer to no rule type set. And because I think it is so close to a no rule type set, that's why I think those captures are just clearly preferable to setting up same potentials. I could stop talking about the rule set, but again, I think it's really interesting how a bunch of ideas, all of which would be fine or good on their own, create trouble. And so this rule set doesn't have plus, unlike the first one, and plus really changes how many tools you have per game, during the game, right? And it changes how you can have cards play off each other so much. And the no repeat numbers, which often would sort of breed having to not use someone's normal crutches, the like standard generic cards that you can lean on and know they'll work and do the job. Instead of it being something that eliminated those and forces you out of a comfort zone, it just locks you into very specific cards with no room to do anything else. So it's something that on a certain rule sets or levels might do a really nice job of increasing creativity, but on this one greatly reduced it. And so my prediction coming in was this will be a draw set, and the draws won't be like fun and competitive. They'll be kind of, there were lots of paths to a tie. So I think to make the set better, I think the more level variation there is, the more it's important to have both plus and plus wall. Without plus wall, the low numbers just basically are never going to, in practice, take the high numbers. And without plus, there's just not going to be enough ways to use the cards synergistically. And I think plus and plus wall are in general the best rules, along with combo. But I think it's even, I think they should almost always be there, but it's even more important to have them there in this kind of situation. I think taking away same wall in the first round was really interesting. I think taking away same can be really interesting, and in round 3 there's no same and no same wall either, and I'm really curious how that turns out. I'm much more optimistic about that kind of set. But the more you limit in other ways, the more plus and plus wall can carry a game to be interesting, and to be interesting both in card select, in selecting your hand, and in playing out the game. And so plus is a rule to be really careful about, and in these multi-level sets, plus wall is too. And lastly, no repeat numbers is really interesting, but you need other tools when that isn't in place, such that the cards can still accomplish the things. They just have to do it through synergy, and here synergy was taken away. So yeah, I guess we'll skip the rest of this slide. So we see that we've seen the round, and it had a high tie rate, but there weren't extraordinarily long matches. We didn't see, I don't think, anything go beyond 5 games. And I probably have complained too much here, though I hope the complaints were somewhat interesting, because I tried to say why, and why more specifically than just any set with no, plus or whatever is bad. I tried to say why specifically I think this one didn't work. So I hope it was interesting on that front. But there were also no matchups between two very top-end players, and there weren't many matchups I think were all that balanced. There are a few you could definitely argue for. depending on what you think of like current form and other things. But I think you didn't get one of those matchups. I once played a matchup with Great Sephiroth. I think it was a set with no combo. And we played a bunch of games. I don't know, somewhere 7, 10, whatever. And we just, like, neither of us were ever going to beat each other, right? We could both make a careless move and it wouldn't be enough for the other person to win because the rule set was too prone to draws for either of us to find a big enough advantage that the other couldn't save it. And so we eventually agreed to coin flip it. And I was lucky to win the coin flips, and it was round 2, I think, and I eventually won the tournament. So I'm really glad that coin flip happened. But I sort of thought that could be something that would happen here. But that was something where just Great Sephiroth was so good. He was never going to lose on a set that was not more complex than that one. And I would like to think at that point I was that good as well. And so went to coin flips. I also think it probably lowers the odds of upsets. And I think we did see that. I think we saw a lot fewer upsets this round than last. And I think part of that is it gives if a match is prone to ties, it's often going to take the favored player more time to win, but they have less risk of losing. And so even if it takes them more ties on average to win, reducing the odds of ever losing means favorites should go through more. Obviously, it depends on the ratio, but I think this was a rule set that favored favorites quite significantly, which you could say is good or bad. I mean, I tend to be a favorite and like rule sets that favor me, but also you want there to be realistic shots. If someone has a really good game, they should be able to take someone out. And here, I think it made that a bit harder to take out the better player. So that was just one concern. Okay, so I didn't answer my question. Was this set as bad as I thought? I don't think it was as bad as I thought. I think from the games, there were a lot more interesting ones where there was a narrower path to the win than I was expecting. I was sort of or a narrower path to hold ties. I was sort of expecting there to be lots of positions where there are like, out of 12 moves left with 4 moves to go, like 3 or 4 moves that tied. And there were a lot more positions where the person had to play one exact move to manage the tie. I don't think it was quite as tie prone as I thought. I think all my concerns do kind of stand, but I think Triple Triad is a fascinating game and will almost always end up more interesting than I predict it to be. And I should move on from this. But I do think it was a bad set, and I think the first round set showed an interesting way to do a very similar thing, right? It had the same kind of level distribution, but it had plus. It also cut a rule. No same wall was an interesting effect that favored 9-9s, but made an interesting gameplay decision of, do you still go with a 10? And people who did very well. Or do you go to 9-9s because same wall is missing? And how do you adjust? And anyways, I thought that one was really interesting. And I think this one kind of failed where that one succeeded. So some stats. Don't have a ton. This is the last page before I answer Villalva's query. So if you want to solve that, now is your last chance to pause and go figure that out. Go look at the level 2s and level 4s and see if you can figure out the only combination that gives you at least one capture against every potential 7-6 corner. So with 12 ties and 12 decisive results, the tie rate here was 50%. Our longest tie matchup, I believe, was Seto Foyer. Yeah, that only went 4 games. Akiyama Fish was our longest at 5. So Akiyama versus Fish was the longest matchup at 5. Last time, I believe every match was decided within 2 games. And it was something like 18 wins to 3 ties or something. Here we had 12 wins to 12 ties, a tie rate of 50%. Over triple, almost 4 times as high a tie rate. And it's unclear. You'd expect as a tournament as the tournaments advance, there to be more ties overall because matchups should be getting more even. Sorry about the typo on this. Also, it's a more drawish set. I'm not sure how much of it was from each, but I think it was clearly a much more drawish set, which isn't necessarily bad, right? It, might be good if most matchups last 2 games rather than on average lasting 1.1 games, right? Here, I think this wasn't a good way to become Drosh, but just noting the difference in effect. Another thing interesting here was using the high level early was much more effective here than it was in the last rule set. I'm not really sure why that was, but Delial used it on move 2 of his game and won the game. CK used it on move 1 of his game and won the game, and Phipps used it on move 2 of his game and tied Piggy Man, who eventually won their matchup. So I think we saw really good results for using your level 10 first and early, and that is a big difference from the previous round, where it was really detrimental to use the level 10 before your opponent within the first 3 moves. And here it played really well. It might be small samples, it's kind of hard to tell here, but from a quick look at the games, I think all the moves were pretty reasonable. And maybe part of that was just that with less interactivity, they were basically just a free safeguard. And if they could be a free safeguard and take something, as they did in the Delial game, you could put immediate pressure, forcing a recapture that they might not be ready to do while building a safeguard yourself. Because obviously a level 10 could be a safe corner, but if you can get it on a side square and it's safe there too, that takes up a lot of real estate. So I thought that was quite interesting. I don't have a really good explanation. I'm sort of curious to brainstorm a bit more about why that happened. I think it was the lesser interactivity made it easier to use them without them ever being subject to setups. But interesting that it was so bad in the last set. And again, small samples, but very, very effective here. And lastly, card selection was really consistent. In 10 of the 12 wins, the winner had an A9, a 9-8, an 8-7, and a 7-6. I think entirely corners, though I didn't check that closely. But 10 of 12 winners basically just played the same hand, but rotated, and with a little variation on what they used for the level 2. And again, that's the sign of a rule set that isn't quite coming together when just everyone's playing the same hand. There were only 2 winners who did not do that, and it was CK, who used an 8-6 instead of an 8-7, but did have the other 3, right? Even when there was one card that was slightly different than the generic form, the other cards were the generic form. And Delial, who instead of a 7-6 used a 7-5 in his winning game. Some other people did use hands that didn't quite meet this standard, didn't quite meet this this generic build, but none of them won their games. You know, some people who did eventually win their games using a hand of this build tried a hand of a different build earlier and did not win those games. But I really think it forced you into something like this, and that's just going to make all hands feel kind of samey, and for it to be hard to figure out something unique or particularly interesting there. So, oh man, sorry I've been so negative. It's kind of a downer of a set for me. I hope some of the people who won on it found their games really interesting. So, Villalva's query. So our captures will depend on ability to overpower and plus wall 6s and 7s. And 2517 has unique powers for a level 2. I think there is no other card that has both a 7... I think there's no other card that's a 7-5-2-1 on level 2. Because it has a 7 to the left, we've now covered anything in 1 or 7 with a 6 to the right, because we have a way to capture that already. We also cover a 6 to the left from 9 and a 7 to the left from 3. So I think it is our only level 2 that covers 4 of the 8 corners. We already have at least one capture on 4 of the 8 corners. And there are 4 corners left. And I give their numbers here. But basically, we need to be able to capture something with a 7 to the right and a 6 down in 1. A 7 down and a 6 to the left in 3. A 6 up and a 7 to the right in 7, and a 6 up and a 7 to the left in 9. And we'll notice there were 2 cards with a 6 up. So we know if we have a 7 down, we're going to be able to capture both of those. So we're going to start with a 7 down, and now we need to cover a 7-6 corner, 7 to the right, 6 down in 1, and a 6-7 corner, or a 7-6, 7 down, and 6 to the left in 3. And there's only one card that has a 7 down, I believe, that covers both those corners, and it is the 6-3-7-2. And I believe Villalva ended up using this, though CK played a clever game using his level 10 early to great effect. and Villalva sadly was not able to win with this hand. But really interesting thought and just thing to look for, and not something I really think about too much. But I thought it was a really cool puzzle, and I think this is the only solution. If anyone has another, please send it in, because I like puzzles like this. And if anyone has puzzles of this type they've come up with, it's just such a kind of different way to approach Triple Triad than I ever have, that it seems like a neat way to build puzzles around it. And that's all I got. I'm sorry I don't have games on this one again. I didn't get the program working, and I decided I wanted to record and realized it wasn't working and decided to do it anyway. So I'm sorry about that, and I'm sorry for the negative tone on this one. I am excited for the next rule set. I guess we can talk about that briefly. I have not played my game yet, though as I record this, a couple games have happened. I'm not going to say results to those right now, but the rule set is another split level set, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, which is an interesting split, missing level 9, but it allows rares, and so I think it was really smart to cut level 9, because Hildebrand A9A19, whatever, it's an A991, is by far the best card ever printed. In any rule set it is allowed, it is correct to use, and it sucks if there's a card way more powerful than any other card that most players don't have access to. It's nice when people basically have access to fair or even pools of cards. And so I think it was really smart to cut level 9 there. It is both plus and plus wall, but no same or same wall. And having started building hands, it's been tricky to build with that in mind. And I think it is a neat challenge, though it has also meant I haven't really known what direction to go yet. And now that I've made this video, I'm going to focus more on thinking about what I want to do on that set, because I didn't really want to think about it too much until I was done with discussing the previous round. But I'm really not sure what way I want to go. And I think there's a lot of directions to go, and I like when there's a lot of possibilities and ways to approach it. And I'm not at all convinced which I'm going to do, and I think cutting level 9 was interesting. There's always the questions of, like, do you play a level 6 that plays best against other level 6s or against like a level 5 or level 7? Or do you want it to be able to counter the opponent's level 10? With only one level 10, they only have one card with access to an A on it. Does that mean coverage of A's is actually not very important to the set? But they could, of course, use a rare, which has 2 A's on it. So how much coverage you want, I think, is really up in the air. Of course, one of the best level 5s is a 7-7 corner, or an 8-8 corner on level 6, or an 8-8 corner on level 7, or a 9-9 corner on level 8. So it could be easy to have cards that are powerful anyway and also cover 10s. But maybe if 10s aren't a threat, you want to cover other things. And also, are you likely to hold on to your level 6 until the end game? Where are you likely to hold it past the point the other person is holding their level 10? Or are you likely to expend it as one of the early cards? You're probably going to spend it early. So maybe if that's your coverage against kind of potential A threats, it's a little tricky to keep up as coverage because you're likely to want to expend it sooner and keep the better cards for the late game. These are just random thoughts, but I think it is a very open set and a lot of tools, but it's unlikely to find something that covers everything cleanly, and that's going to make it an interesting game of picking where you want coverage and where you don't. So I'm really curious to see what happens in that set. There are 6 matches. 2 of them have already been decided. There are 4 more to go. And I think they'll be good. And so hopefully in the next video, that one, my normal program will be able to show the games. So I will definitely be able to give better game coverage of ones in the next round. Hopefully I can come back if there were any standout games from this round and give them the coverage they deserve, because I do think this was a tough set to win. Oh, one last thing I wanted to say about this round was a lot of games were decided, matches were decided, when someone made a very strange hand decision or played in a really weird way, where they kind of gave a card, either they gave a card that could be captured with no kind of counterplay. There was no combo back. There was no, okay, but I grabbed something else back. kind of just giving a card for not very much happened quite a bit, which was a little odd to me. And the other thing that happened was there were a bunch of players who played a good game or two and then switched to a hand that was this is how I ended up winning my game against Genova. Is our first game she played, I think, a really good game where I played a corner and she responded in 5, specifically in a way where she was using side to side cards rather than corners, and it set them up to be really safe in the touching side squares and also to counter all the corners I wanted to do. And I thought it was a really nice move and immediately put me under some pressure, and I had to be, I thought, quite careful to hold that game. And then the second game, she switched to a hand where the level 10 and the level 8 were for the same corner, and ended up having real directional weaknesses and tried to play a similar way, but it no longer worked because the cards didn't support it. And that actually happened in a bunch of other games as well, where someone would pick their level 10 and 8 to be the same corner, like have the same directional strengths. And one, I think even the level 6 had very similar directional strengths. And this really confused me. So I think a lot of games were determined by someone picking a hand where maybe they thought their high levels should be able to plus wall each other. Like if you have Squall and an 8-7 corner for the same corner, maybe the 6-4 of Squall can plus wall that, and you're trying to build out from there. But I think these were just not the right hand builds, and a couple people that lost jumped to those and got punished for them. So I thought that was an interesting way that like at least 3 games were decided by someone just really committing to, I want all my good cards to be strong in the same way. And that was clearly became a standard way to lose on this set. And so try to avoid that, I guess. Yeah, so I guess that's it for round 2. I really like Villalva's query. I'm excited for round 3. I may lose excitement when I lose in round 3, but if I do not lose in round 3, I will be coming back very excited, I think, to talk about that round, because there's already a lot of action. And should we mention, were there any big upsets? I don't think there were huge upsets. Seto was the first to advance. I was the second. Tezuka beat Scythe, but Scythe hasn't been very active, and Tezuka has been excellent. Akiyama beat Fish, who had knocked out Turds in the previous round. DJ defeated Wingus. Piggyman defeated Phipps, which is a really good win, I think, and difficult on this set. Aesala beat Dalamar. Metis beat Doomtrain. Crescent beat Starscream. CK beat Villalva. That's an upset, I think. And Delial beat Blizzard, and Nemesis Divina beat Zoom. And so, anyways, wanted to congratulate all 12 winners. We'll be seeing them in the next round. And say goodbye to round 2. And say hello to a round I'm really excited about. Though, until I figure out a hand I'm happy with, maybe more nervous than excited.